first, I'm gonna go ahead and create what we call a huddle. A huddle is a configuration management component. It's basically a collection of assets, and by assets I mean sheets, dashboards, and reports that make up our solution. You know, we can combine sheets with references, formula lookups, sheets or sources for reports. There are also widgets on dashboards. All that stuff makes up tools that we wanna make sure are tracked. We wanna make sure that are accurately functioning as expected, because last thing we wanna do is pull up a dashboard that says no match or invalid data type, right? It's always important to know when changes are made so that we can adjust them and maintain our solution. So first things first, when I create the huddle, I want to give it a name, and then I want to provide it some context. What does that solution on Smartsheet actually do? So for this demo, I'm going to say this is a sales tracking tool. That's not the best description, but I'm just, for purposes of demo, I'm going to plow through this. So once I create my huddle, I'm going to click into it, and I notice that it's blank. First things first, I need to add some assets from Huddle. You'll notice that I'm selecting connections. Now, connections are established when you sign up for Huddle. It allows us to connect into your Smartsheet account. You authorize us to gain access to the workspaces so that we can track the items that you allow us to track. So I've selected the demo connection, and you'll see that if I click into Smartsheet, you'll see the same workspace structure, folder structure, and then all the different artifacts show up in my file viewer. So if I click into Demo Portal, you'll notice that the folders are gone, but now you can see all the different sheets, dashboards, and reports that are in my Demo Portal workspace. I'm gonna go ahead, click them, track them, and assign them to my demo huddle that I just created. I get a notification that they're successfully being tracked now, and I'll click back into my demo huddle, and you'll see the visualization of these assets. So at first glance, everything is yellow. That signifies a new item. I'm gonna go ahead and save this to get rid of that color, and we'll zoom into this section here. So you're noticing a bunch of different types of artifacts with a bunch of links, right? This light pink purple color signifies a sheet. This green color signifies a dashboard, and this color over here signifies a report. If in Smartsheet there's any cross-sheet references, formulas, cell links, data sources, source sheets for reports, all those system connections will be visualized here automatically with these links. These links are not editable. They're coming straight from Smartsheet. We create a relationship between all of the different artifacts that make up our solution. We can obviously drag and drop everything to reorganize them. We can also create manual links if I wanted to say that this should be connected to the dashboard for some reason. But essentially what we're doing here is visualizing the flow of data, the relationships, and the connections between all of our assets that make up our solution. That's step one in what a huddle actually provides us. The second step is kind of that index of all these different artifacts, right? Similar to what you saw in the huddle map, this is a breakdown of all the artifacts, simple links to the versions, simple link to the documentation, and then any links to references. So this one pipeline metric sheet has 4 different references. We can click this to view that reference in a different area. And then lastly, the huddle documentation, which I'll cover in a little bit. I'm gonna click into one of these announcements sheets. So this is a sheet that's in my workspace. We can absolutely click over into this to kind of view it on the Smartsheet side. You'll see here that this is just a blank sheet, right? I've got all my different columns. I've got all my different bits of information behind the scenes. At first glance inside of Huddle, you'll notice that we don't have any data. There's no data in the sheet, but we also don't track any data on Smartsheet side. So similar to what Zaid mentioned, we're purely looking at the configuration of these artifacts. We're looking at the schema, the structure. We're not touching rows. We don't want to get row data. We don't want to provide backup. We don't want to do any of that stuff. This is purely the structure. So we know that references to other sheets, we know that data that might be flowing up to dashboards, and we know that automations that rely on different column types. We want to track that status of the schema, right? So looking at this sheet really quickly, you'll notice that we've got a list of columns, some information around those, some high-level information. But the really cool part of what Huddle actually brings to version control is this sort of, I spilled the beans already, version control. It allows us to track changes to our solution over time. So when we speak to users in the space, we realize that sometimes they're reluctant to open admin access to other users that might be in their group because they don't want to have people inadvertently delete or change a column that could be critical to the solution, right? So this tool allows us to collaborate at a bigger level now, so that if people do want to attain more responsibility in our solution, we can open up admin privileges and delegate some of that work and track changes now. So that in this example here, we notice that the initial version for the sheet that was created versus the live version now is showing a change in the title column. It looks like somebody's changed it so it's plural. Now, somebody also changed the content column to go from text to drop down. Those might be actions that came out of a meeting that somebody actually completed. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how we save a version. So if I go in here, we can save this current state version with a simple message that says, this was the outcome of a meeting on 12/13, right? I'm going to confirm this and it's saved my version. And now you'll notice that there are no changes. The live version to the version that we're looking at right now are identical. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a quick example. Let's go remove this S and make this column title. I'll go ahead and fetch the new version. And you can see here, if I look at that previous version that was saved to the live version now, you'll see that I removed the S in titles and now it's just a simply title. Now I can save this update as a new version, or if we say, hey, you know what, this was not an approved change, I can click on this particular change and roll this back to the sheet. Rolling an item back to a previous state will not affect data. We're simply updating that column. Now there's a bunch of different things behind the scenes that take place here. I'm not going to do this actually on this demo, but that's basically in a nutshell how we can manage versions for our solutions, track those critical elements that make up the sheet. We've got columns, we've got sheet metadata, we've got automations behind the scenes, we've got sheet summaries, and we've got cross-sheet references that we want to track and make sure that these changes don't affect our overarching solution. Or if they do affect it, we can simply roll them back with the click of a button. So another big component that our configuration management, our huddles provide is documentation. How many times do we build solutions and we say we're going to do documentation eventually, or we have a meeting to update documentation, but somebody bails and we have to reschedule. So our documentation always suffers, or it's always outdated, or it's always behind, We've added a documentation element to this version control system so that our Gen AI that we've created allows us to capture the context of what the solution actually is, the context from the sheet itself, and generates a baseline documentation that's structured and standardized, and will also be connected to versions so that anytime a change is made, our tool that's tracking versions will also be connected to the documentation component and say, hey, it's time to update this documentation. Our Gen AI can generate those updates for you automatically, or you can edit these so that you can use our simple WYSIWYG editor to basically add images. You could add tables. You can customize all this information in here to make it match exactly what maybe the system doesn't know about your solution. You can feed this data into this builder. You can update your documentation, and then also our system will learn from the context you're providing to always improve and make your documentation better over time. Now I'm going to jump back into the Huddle area and show that we also have a documentation component for huddles as well. I'm going to go ahead and add all of my assets and generate documentation for the huddle. This is going to pull all that individual tracked item documentation that you just saw and add the context of the huddle. It's going to add the index of all the different artifacts, and then it's going to build a structural document that allows you to have a package for your build, right? This is a place that's also going to be maintained, and it's also going to have the data that's tied to the versions for the individual artifacts, but then also your huddle level versions as well, so that your documentation is up to date at the individual sheet, report, and dashboard level, but then also at your solution level, right? That's a really quick overview of how huddles bring configuration management to Smartsheet solutions. We empower everybody with visualization, with version control, and with documentation. Now, the configuration management piece is crucial in software development. We want to make sure that we are tracking all the changes and we're noting all the different things in documentation. This really empowers us to build really good business apps to provide value and efficiency to other users in the organization.